Hello, everybody. My name is Dave Jackson, he, him.
My name is Ryan Batie, they, them.
And this is Tales from the Backlog, where each week I'm joined by a guest to deep dive a game from our backlogs. Today's game is Dark Souls 2, but a few things real quick before we get started. If this is your first time here, here's the spoiler policy. First of all, if you haven't played Dark Souls 2 and you don't want to be spoiled, don't worry, we're not going to spoil anything for a while. We'll talk in generalities for quite some time. You'll see a timestamp also down in the show notes for when spoilers begin. Until that point, you're safe. And if you like the show, please consider supporting however you can, whether that is on Patreon. You can tell friends, you can share the episode in spaces that you hang out, leave ratings and reviews, like and comment on YouTube. All of those things help people find the show, and that is what we want. Now, as you heard at the top of the show, Ryan is back. Ryan is one host of Lightning Strikes Thrice and more on the Pitch Drop Network, and they've been on the podcasting adventure so long that they're not quite sure how they ended up here. Ryan, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me again, Dave.
Of course. For people who've been with us for a while, or for newcomers, I suppose, too, Ryan's been on the show a few times before. We did Tunic together. That was episode 63. We did one of the most cited and commented on episodes on the show was a discussion about if video games need to be fun. That was in May of 2023. Continues to be one that people bring up to me. And most recently was Lost Odyssey in episode 135. And I'm really glad to have you back on in particular to talk about Dark Souls 2 today.
I am so happy that you asked me. It's we've been kind of like trying to figure out another game to talk about, and when you presented Dark Souls 2 to me, I was like, oh my gosh, I am so excited. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, well, we did have another game that we did agree to talk about, and then I just didn't play that yet, so maybe we'll come back to that at a later time. But today's Dark Souls 2, oh, and I will say, I will be talking about the Scholar of the First Sin version. I have not played the original version since it released, so Scholar is fresh in my mind. It is an RPG developed by From Software, published by Bandai Namco for contemporary consoles and PC in 2014, and that Scholar of the First Sin edition released in 2015, which updated the game a little bit, added, all the DLCs in one package. I barely remember what the original game was like in contrast with Scholar. Ryan, do you? I can't speak on it really.
No, it's so funny because it's very thematically in keeping with the story and themes of Dark Souls 2, the game, because it's been so long since I've played vanilla Dark Souls 2 that I do not remember except for like brief snippets and snatches.
I do think that it's still available in like a very unusual case in the modern, gaming industry. I think you can still buy the vanilla version like on Steam. Not usually how these things work.
Yeah, so there is some update content that was pushed in a patch that coincided with Scholar, and so it is not exactly vanilla anymore, but it is as close to vanilla as you can get still.
Okay. Or you go pick up an old Xbox 360 copy or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
If people don't know what Dark Souls 2 is, we have our quick pitches per usual. I say Dark Souls gets the type of sequel where the designers try a bunch of weird ideas instead of resting on their laurels. Ryan, what would you say?
I would say Dark Souls 1 was somewhat improperly described as a return to NES difficulty. Now it gets its own Simon's Quest.
That's perfect. I love that so much. As a Simon's Quest enjoyer, I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Dark Souls 2 was directed by Tomohiro Shibuya and Yui Tanimura, notably not directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki. It's the only one in the Souls series not directed by him. Produced by Masanori Takeuchi, and another notable design credit. I'm not sure how important this actually is, but I thought it was cool. Naotoshi Zin, who is the founder of From Software, way back in 1986, founded the company when they didn't make games yet. Is credited as a lead designer on Dark Souls 2. And that is the only game that he has a design credit on, except for The Adventures of Cookie and Cream, of course.
It is important to know that I think he was the name that was dropped, even though he's just an executive producer on this series. He was the name that was dropped when Miyazaki was asked in an interview, hey, would you ever bring Kingsfield back officially? And I think he said, we would need to bring Naotoshi Zin and a couple of the other like FromSoft executives that actually worked on that game back in, because that's their vision. We would want to,
baby.
Yeah, that's their baby, which I find super interesting.
Now, of course, Zin has like producer executive credits on everything From Software has ever done, but just seeing like that name as a lead game designer only in Dark Souls 2 was really interesting to see that. So I played this on PC on this replay, and it took me 47 hours to beat. That includes all 3 DLCs. Where did you play this time? About how long was your playthrough?
Sure. So I think my play clock was about 53 hours. Some of that might have been just like me hanging out, playing with the cats while the game was running. I played the PS4 version on PS5, and this was, I think, my fourth full time my fourth full time playing Dark Souls 2. I realize now that it's over 10 years old, so that's not that crazy, but when I was tallying them up, I was like, oh wow, I've played it 4 times. It's a huge game too.
Yeah, that's one of the points I wanted to kind of touch on a little bit. This is the biggest of all of these games until Elden Ring, basically. From Demon Souls on to Elden Ring, this is the longest one. There's so much here. There's more boss fights. There's more areas to go to. Very long for this series. Now, you mentioned this is your 4th time playing it. Were you there on release when this came out? Were you into Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1 back in the day when they came out too?
Yeah, I was actually. It's funny because Something Awful forums got me both into the Duckfeed community and Bonfireside chat, and also the Souls series. So there was this like big mega thread on the games subforum of the Something Awful forums that was like talking about Demon Souls in these just like hushed, breathless whispers, and it was like, this game's totally gonna blow your mind. It's doing things that I haven't seen in years, and I feel like it's actually like respecting me as a player, but it's also so alien and weird. And I was just like, oh wow, I have to get this because that was when people were still just importing the Hong Kong version from Play Asia. And so when it finally got an official release, I was like so stoked to go out and get it, and then I bounced way the fuck off. I was like, oh no, what did I do? And then I came back to it 6 months later, and I was hooked for life, and kind of got into also video game podcasts, at least in part through my love of the Souls series as well. And so yeah, I was there at launch. I played pre-Scholar Dark Souls 2 about 1 time through. But it's been so long that I don't really remember. It's like, oh, right, I remember certain enemies were not in the first iteration of a very early area.
Right.
And that made people mad. And I, and it's like some dungeon ecology got worse, some dungeon ecology got better. But as far as like details, I can't speak to it.
Yeah. So first of all, shout out to Bonfireside Chat, which is, to me, it's the definitive like play along with a Dark Souls game podcast out there. Really, really wonderful. Kay and Gary have both been on the show, former guests of this show. Really good people, and that show is just really great. The Dark Souls 2 episodes are still on their public feed, so if you listen to this and you want to play through Dark Souls 2 and you want to listen to like an area by area play along show, check out Bonfireside Chat. So for me, I got into Dark Souls 1 a couple years after it released. I think it was just a guy at GameStop was like, oh, you're looking for an RPG? People like Dark Souls, and just recommended it. So I got it. And the way that a lot of people bounce off of Dark Souls 1, I did too. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I actually made it all the way to Capra Demon, which is a little bit longer than most people who bounce off. But I made it to Capra Demon with a build that could not beat Capra Demon. So I restarted and like blew through it. And, you know, people know me in our kind of indie podcast community as a Souls guy. And it started with that. I bought Dark Souls 2 right the day that it came out on the 360, but I got not hard like locked, but like I ran up against the Sentinels in the Lost Bastille and I couldn't beat them. And I just kind of gave up and came back to it with Scholar in 2018, 2019, played it all the way through for the first time and loved it. Replaying it here for the show because it won a Patreon poll. I made a poll where I was like, I want to play a Souls game. I just listed 4 FromSoft games. Which one should I play? People picked Dark Souls 2 because they have good taste. And here we are.
You've cultivated a great community, a great and correct community.
We'll get to those other ones later, but like, I'm glad that Dark Souls 2 won the poll because I'm really interested to talk about this one. I'm excited whenever I do Demon Souls, whenever I do Sekiro, I'm excited to talk about those games. But I was most excited to talk about Dark Souls 2 because I think that this is, it is the black sheep in the Dark Souls series. It's the most divisive one by a mile, I feel like. And I feel like it's pretty misunderstood. And I think that a lot of the criticism that I hear about it, I feel like they boil down to, I don't like this because it isn't like Dark Souls 1. A lot of they made a lot of changes, a lot of divisive changes to the mechanics, the way that your builds work, the enemy placement, the encounter design, lots of changes to this game. And I feel like a lot of people, I don't mean this to sound as snooty as it probably will, but I feel like a lot of people kind of refuse to think about why those changes were made. And so one of the things I'm excited about in this episode, because I've done multiple Dark Souls, Elden Ring podcasts in the past, I'm not going to spend time talking about like, here's how the stamina system works in this.
Right.
I really want to focus on those changes because they're not all home runs, but I think that they're all interesting changes to think about and think about why did they decide to take away your iframes at the beginning of the game? Why would they do that? They didn't do it for no reason. So I really like this game. I'm excited to talk about all the ways that it's different and interesting.
Yeah, I want to say that there are some Dark Souls 2 complaints from people who are genuinely haters that I understand. And, it's just not where my own values lie. I think that like the trajectory of Demon Souls to Dark Souls 1 to Dark Souls 2, you can see them trying all these wild ideas, and they are weird, inscrutable games. But Dark Souls 1 was so elegant and in so many ways streamlined in its design that I feel like other folks got into treating it as this like perfectible object where they were like, this game is about this kind of combat with these kinds of like numerical values attached to the combat. And that is why they fell in love with Dark Souls. That is not why I fell in love with Dark Souls. And those changes to Dark Souls 2 are significant. They're just not in my value system. So like, yeah, as a knee-jerk contrarian, and a person who really appreciates games that ask somewhat bracing or challenging questions of their players and games that are consciously in conversation with their own series. I am primed to just like love Dark Souls 2, but like it is more than just some like top down, I love it in the abstract cool guy way, like I want to stress that like, this is not hipsterism, me like genuinely loving this game, even it's like in play, in vibe, in narrative, there is so much to love in Dark Souls 2. There is so much Dark Souls 2. So some of it maybe not as good, but I recognize people's complaints about the change in kinesthetics and the change in area design, how they're no longer like this like interlocking, beautiful, elegant maze of a thing. But like Dark Souls 2 is very like you said, like you mentioned, it is very intentional and considered in those changes. So they never really bothered me. And it's like the way that I kind of see it, if the levels of Dark Souls 1 like fold in on themselves in a way that like ends up feeling really surprising and satisfying, I feel like the game, the play, the themes, the story of Dark Souls 2 also start to fold in on themselves in a similar way. And so it's like doing to the whole game what Dark Souls 1 did to the levels.
That's a really good point. It's one of my favorite parts about Dark Souls 2 is how everything feeds into everything else in a way that I'm not going to say that they don't in the other games, but they don't as like clearly and like really identifiably as they do in Dark Souls 2. I think that Dark Souls 2 has the most interesting story of the Dark Souls games by a wide margin. And there's a lot of things within the game and the way that the game is designed that reinforce the themes of the story that you can make those connections in Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 is way less elegant about this. But Dark Souls 2, I really feel like a lot of the things that people talk about really play into the story in cool ways, which we'll talk about really soon. We will spend more time in this episode talking about narrative and themes than I have ever spent in a From Software episode before, because I think that they are more identifiable and they're more baked into everything.
Yeah. And also for me, like there's more to talk about within those themes too, because the game is mostly questions, and it's like, you know, a lot of people who have complaints about Dark Souls 3, it's like they talk about how it tries to tie things in too neat of a bow sometimes, and it makes some of the like wonder and awe of the story fall apart. It baked into everything are these story and themes, and also they are still up to interpretation and discussion, which I love.
Yeah. Even the biggest question of the game, or one of the biggest questions, ends in a pretty messy, like debatable philosophical discussion, which maybe we can talk about in the spoiler section. So let's take our first music break of the episode. When we come back, we'll kind of set up what Dark Souls 2 is about and kind of touch on some of those themes before we get into those gameplay things. Dark Souls 2 is set in the kingdom of Drang Lake, where you play as an undead searching for the cure to the undead curse. From Dark Souls 1, the same undead curse that causes hollowing. Hollowing is an erosion of memory and humanity to the point where you're just a mindless husk that basically just attacks anything that comes near you. This is part of the early story, and then they kind of set you free. There is an old retired firekeeper that you talk to at the beginning that says all people come here for the same reason, to break the curse. And that undead curse and memory specifically are really key to the story and some of the gameplay things in Dark Souls 2 in really, really cool ways. Also, I want to say, this is the first time I have gone through a whole From Software game and read the item descriptions. And that might be part of why I identify and like resonate with the story more, because I took the time to talk to all the NPCs and read the item descriptions I've had several playthroughs in the past where I've been like, this is the time, and then I fall off of it within a few hours. But I did it this time, all 47 hours. Most of the items I picked up, all the boss souls, read that stuff. It's awesome.
That is impressive because this has the most readable stuff in it also.
Yeah. But yeah, memory and the undead curse. So one of the ways that they show you this, as the curse works, as I said, you slowly go hollow, you slowly lose your memory until you're just kind of a husk, doing whatever it is that's like the strongest drive for you. So you go to a lot of places where it's like these enemy soldiers, their duty was once to protect this fort. Now they're hollow, and protecting the fort is all they're ever capable of doing anymore. So that's why they attack you when you go there. You can't reason with them anymore. They're hollow. A lot of the NPCs that you meet, like key story NPCs, you're trying to do their quests and stuff like that, go through these stages of hollowing in a really, often tragic way that really reinforces like, this is what you're fighting against. You're kind of special. You're the chosen undead again, but you see how this works out. And so if you're going to try and follow in some of these characters' footsteps who were trying to break this curse, you see why you might want to do that through these NPCs. This was something that like Dark Souls 1 introduced the idea of hollowing and the undead curse and things like that. I think it was Dark Souls 1. But the story of Dark Souls 1 is not about this process so much. Dark Souls 2 is like, let's really explore this idea.
Absolutely. And so I wasn't entirely sure where to talk about this because this game is hard to talk about in like a linear way, and
right.
And we're trying our best. But one thing that I love about this game is that it does have some references and callbacks to Dark Souls 1, but they have been warped and twisted, and we're not sure if like people's memories have warped and twisted them, because this game takes place seemingly thousands of years and thousands of cycles after Dark Souls 1, and you feel that in just like the kind of forgetfulness and how like flat and huge everything is. It almost feels like it's like the universe is expanding, and as it expands it becomes like weaker and thinner and turns into something else. And also like metatextually, I feel like it's asking the question like, hey, if in a game you do the same thing over and over and over again, sequel after sequel after sequel, you will stop remembering what your original purpose was and why you found a purpose in that game in the first place.
That is so there's a quote from it's in the opening cutscene. A narrator reads this passage. They say, long ago in a walled-off land far to the north, a great king built a great kingdom. I believe they called it Drang Lake. One day, yada, yada, yada. One day you will stand before its decrepit gate without really knowing why. And that's exactly what you were just talking about there. This is something I've seen criticism of this as them hand-waving away, like not being able to explain anything, which in my opinion could not be more wrong for exactly the reason that you said there. Like, they tell you at the beginning of a 50-hour video game why you're doing the thing that you're doing. You're trying to break the curse. Your character is trying to find a cure for the undead curse. And then you play the game for dozens of hours and you get to the final boss. Do you remember why you started? I didn't the first time. I went in the gates of the castle and fought what I thought would be the final boss because that was what was in front of me. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so to me, this isn't From Software being like, yeah, we can't explain this shit, just like go kill stuff. It's perfectly in line with that theme of forgetfulness and the repetition, the process of going hollow and forgetting, everything but your core focus, your core motivation, basically, which in this game does happen to be fighting stuff most of the time.
Yeah. And
that also kind of leads into another thing that I hear criticism for Dark Souls 2 about. And like, this episode kind of, by the way that I'm thinking about Dark Souls 2, is going to have a little bit of like responding to common criticism that I don't normally do on the show. But there's so much conversation about this game. It's kind of hard not to reference the things that others seem to not like about it sometimes. So
yeah,
this is another one of those. The fact that the world is so spread out and the areas feel much more disjointed than they did in Dark Souls 1. Like you said, Dark Souls 1 had this world design where every level like looped back on it, the others. It was kind of built in this cylinder of interlocking levels and areas and connected by elevators and passageways and things. And frankly, they never did that again until the Elden Ring DLC is the closest thing to that again, in my estimation. Dark Souls 2 is a hub and spoke design. So you have your central hub of Majula, and then you have all these different offshoots that go off in different directions. And even on those paths that you go on, sometimes you will finish one area, ride an elevator, and go into a completely different looking area that it probably shouldn't be at the end of that elevator if you're looking at things literally, right? But because there's a story theme involved with memory and repetition, and especially the idea that if things become rote, you stop remembering them, this really helps me to understand why you might go through a tunnel or ride an elevator and come into an area that shouldn't be at the end of that tunnel or the end of that elevator. Like the journey was uneventful or just not memorable in any way. So your character doesn't remember because you're going hollow and losing your memory. You only remember the big events. I don't remember what it was like driving home from work today, but I did it. And now I'm here. I'll remember this podcast. This was the eventful thing.
Right. Well, and also if you wanted to, you could stretch that out to be like, this kingdom is so far gone and has undergone so many cycles that the land itself is losing its memory. So either you forgot, or like maybe there was something between the windmill and the fortress, the volcano fortress at one point, but like it just doesn't exist anymore because it's just been lost to time. I think besides the fact that Dark Souls 1 was just so elegant at it and it made people frustrated that Dark Souls 2 was trying something totally different, I think one reason why folks might be a little bit grumpier at this is also because they know some behind the scenes rumors. So, there's 2 directors on this game, and the scuttlebutt is that it was Shibuya who was working on it first, and then Tanemura was brought in after like the internal folks at From Software were like, oh, this isn't very good. And then a whole bunch of stuff got scrapped and had to get glued together and all this stuff. And, they drastically changed some of the storylines. Like Lucatiel was initially supposed to be like a comedic quest, like Don Quixote style and shit. So
that explains the giant windmill. Yeah,
exactly. That's probably for spoiler wall stuff, but I feel like people heard that and saw this disjointed nature of the world, and they were like, oh, this is a compromise, therefore it's lesser. But it's like, maybe initially it was a compromise, but that doesn't mean that it's not doing something and saying something specific.
Yeah.
And I hate when people are like, oh, well, I know some of the behind the scenes stuff, so actually like this is wrong and bad and an objective flaw. It's like, no, the stuff it does with it is cool.
Yeah, I mean, games are one of the most complicated artistic projects that you could ever make, and adjustments have to be made along the way in every single game that's ever been made. And if it was a pivot or an adjustment, I think they looped in the themes of the story in a really interesting way. Like, if the criticism is, I like the world design of Dark Souls 1 more, it plays more to what I like in video games, I completely understand and probably agree with that. But to say that the world design in Dark Souls 2 is terrible and it's just a bunch of things mashed together, I don't think you're looking at, the story, which frankly, a lot of people, myself included, don't look at the story in these games. Really diving into the story of them is a fairly recent thing for me, probably since I started doing the podcast and, thinking a little bit more about the story things in these games. The first time I played Dark Souls 1, I didn't give a shit about the story. I didn't read anything. I didn't listen to anything anybody said. I was just playing the game. And I don't know. I think that it fits if you put in the effort to read and especially talk to the characters. I mean, basically, a lot of the characters that you meet are all losing their minds throughout the course of the game. And it fits in. Like, why would that not happen to you too?
Right. Yeah, 100%.
In addition to that, like, long-running theme of memory and the curse, there are other things going on in the story, primarily how Dark Souls 1 set up the idea of the cycle. And your goal in Dark Souls 1, should you choose to do it or not once you get there, is to link the fire and kind of keep the age of fire going. Or let it die out and let a new age come in and break the cycle. Dark Souls 2, again, is not content to just roll with that again. They have people studying this, characters studying this, trying to figure out, is there another way to do this? Is this something that should be done? It's a philosophical discussion that, like, players of Dark Souls 1 had, about it. Should you link the fire at the end or not? And then in Dark Souls 2, they have characters that are talking about this, which I think is really interesting because it has been so long. The kingdom is falling apart. Everything is decrepit everywhere that you go. And so they want to make it more of a conversation. Is it right to prolong this or not?
Which is, I think, an absolutely amazing theme because you can see how degraded the world has become. And so the question becomes like a stronger question each time the cycle is extended. And so by the time Dark Souls 2 comes around, it's, should we let things die if things are, absolutely miserable and no one remembers why we're even here anymore is a pretty heavy question for like a mostly mechanics focused RPG to be asking. You also have corruption of power here as a theme to watch out for. And I think that then dovetails with a theme that they bring in with the DLCs, which is all about like the corrupting power of desire and want. And so then it's like you have both the power itself corrupting and then the seeking of the power corrupting at the same time. And I really like the way that those two kind of mesh together.
Yeah, the means of power for a lot of people is seeking powerful souls. I mean, that's what your character is told to do too. Seek powerful souls, seek the king. That's what the Emerald Herald tells you at the beginning of the game, basically. And you meet a bunch of characters who've also sought power in different ways. Maybe their soul grew really powerful, and that brought other corrupting forces their way that they were sometimes able to withstand, sometimes not. Sometimes they had to do drastic things when that corrupting force got near. It's one of my favorite storylines that we'll talk about in the spoiler section. But kind of Lord of the Ringsy in a way when... when these people are given access to this great power, that can corrupt them, but it also draws other things that can corrupt their way that might want that power for themselves, those souls specifically.
Yeah.
Anything else like narratively, I think, before we move on to something else? I have a good segue unless you have something.
It's stuff that I've already touched on, but I love that the narrative and the meta-narrative are in sync with each other the whole time, because the same questions that the game is asking, or, that the game world is asking of the player character, the game itself is asking of the player. And that I just, that is not going to be a currency that spends for everyone, but it spends extremely well for me. I love love when a game is not afraid to be up its own ass, but its up its own assness is not the whole point of it.
Yeah,
It's like,
okay.
This is a really good game. And also it does some wild ass meta stuff that I can be a sicko about.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always thought, or for a long time, I guess I've thought, probably until replaying Dark Souls 2 here, I've kind of thought of your player character, which is, you're there doing the thing because the game tells you you're there doing the thing. And they've, in a way, that has also been an extension of me, the player, playing the game. I'm fighting the enemies, I'm getting the treasure, I'm fighting the bosses, because that's what the game is. It's doing that. But Dark Souls 2 specifically wants you to ask those same questions that you see elsewhere in the world with other characters about yourself too. And you're on the surface, your player character seems like this anonymous, guy who's just killing everything in front of him. But this game does ask you to ask those same questions of your character too, which is cool, as you said. Totally agree.
Absolutely.
With that. Yeah.
Rad.
Kind of along the lines of like that kind of depressing, falling apart nature that we've talked about is Dark Souls 2 has, for my money, the strongest vibes in the series, which is not a tangible thing per se, but visually, I think the game is super moody. There's a lot of like low light, early sunset, golden hour type areas at the beginning of the game. Majula is in this constant sunset. The first area, the Forest of the Fallen Giants, is also in this kind of perpetual sunset state. It just gives this really moody feel to it. And then you go in your various crypts and caves and things like that throughout the game too. But visually and with the music, I think that we can say that Dark Souls 2 is vibey as hell, and people will be like, yeah, it is. It definitely is. It's super atmospheric. But if we have to define how it does that, the story does a lot of that if you're paying attention, but the visuals, the music do a lot of lifting there too.
Absolutely. And I think that if I were to give the vibe a word, which it's not fair because the vibe is a bunch of different things working together, but it is a profoundly melancholy game. It's like Dark Souls 2 has moments of sadness, but the sadness is like very majestic and grand. And this game is just like wistful. There's a feeling of just like lost nostalgia for something that I've never actually experienced that is suffused through the whole game. And I think that the like loneliness of all of the characters plus the perpetual sunset, the kind of like more faded color palette that they then decide to like, when they decide to go for pops of color, they really go for it. But the rest of it is a little bit more muted than Dark Souls 1. And yeah, I think, and then, yeah, especially the Majula music, but some other music, like it all works in concert to just kind of like be sort of a heavy sigh in an emotionally affecting way, as far as that vibe goes for me.
Yeah, I think as far as the music goes, first of all, there's not music in most places that you go, as it, how it normally works in the series, which is a vibe in itself to just be somewhere listening to your own footsteps and then environmental sounds if there are any. But when they do choose to have music, it's usually like melancholy in a way is a good word. The Majula music, I'm thinking of like the singing in Shrine of Amana, the opening, like the Firekeeper's song at the beginning. There's really no happiness to go around anywhere in the game. When they choose to use like environmental music, I think that's the strongest stuff. I've never been a huge fan of like the boss music in Souls games. I think that that's mostly like get your blood pumping, kind of stress you out type music more than, some later stuff, like the Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring, they start to get into a little bit more of a diverse sound with those. Dark Souls 2 has some of that. The soundtrack's by Yuka Kitamura, who is a longtime From Software composer back to 2012, and then has done, I think, most, if not all of the games since then for FromSoft. it's just a thing with me that the boss music in particular is rarely like jumps out at me in this game and in Dark Souls 1 the way that it might later on Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring type stuff.
Definitely. I do feel like there are a couple of areas that like, so it is visually, here's another responding to our haters section a little bit, but there are folks who believe that the architectural aesthetic is more generic epic fantasy in Dark Souls 1 than in Dark Souls 2 rather than it is in Dark Souls 1. I don't really fully agree with that, but I also agree it's like they had so many areas to make that they definitely made a lot of fucking castles and caves. I won't you know, I won't deny that, but there are a couple of areas that are attempting both aesthetics and just, you know, visual details that previous Souls games didn't even try to approach. You know, just two specific examples for me are No Man's Wharf, which plays with darkness in a much more successful and atmospheric way than Damn
Tomb
Giants Cave, Tomb of the Giants, ever did. And then also Brightstone Cove Seldora is, you know, this far satellite of the kingdom that has been slowly being overtaken by sand dunes and spiders' nests over the intervening hundreds of years. And like, you know, that area is just absolutely disgusting with both ranged and monster trap ambushes, and that can be a little bit annoying. But as far as like the look of this desert eating this former town, it is so striking and cool and like stark and bleak as well.
There's a lot of pretty striking areas for sure. I think that the game is kind of front loaded with some of those. Like, I think that the places that you're in Forest of the Fallen Giants are not really that impressive visually, but like if you look out at that sunset, it looks really good. Also like the kind of the moonlit vibes in the Lost Bastille, another kind of early game area. It gives it a much different flavor. But all of these places are either falling apart or they're being overtaken by something that you don't want overtaking them. So those reinforces the story, of course, but it also reinforces the just kind of dour mood in all of the places that you're in. Nothing is going well anywhere.
No.
Including Majula. Like, Majula's deserted, and if you do a bunch of NPC quests, you can fill it back up with cast-offs and weirdos, but like Majula is a super just moody place too. Like, it's chill, it's everyone's favorite hub area, but it's like, it's not a happy place. I mean, you can turn it into a place with your friends that you've made, but the vibes there are still low down. So we've done a couple of responding to our haters sections, as you've called it, so far, and this is the most interesting thing about Dark Souls 2 to me to kind of think about and not do the knee jerk. Probably, you know, I was there in 2014 when I first played this, being like, this is different. I don't like that it's different. They changed a bunch of stuff that I don't know that it needed to be changed, and now I'm here. This replay forced me to really consider and think about the things that are different, the ways that From Software has tried to evolve. Like, it's interesting to think, and it's interesting to have the context too, that when I first played Dark Souls 2, I had not played Demon's Souls, so I didn't have that context at all. Dark Souls 1 was the only one that I had played, and so that was the canon for how these games work. And I think that was the way it was for a lot of people. Demon's Souls didn't sell nearly as well as Dark Souls 1 did. So now we get to Dark Souls 2. From Software has been evolving this whole time. One of the coolest things that I've done in the past few years is gone back and play Kingsfield 4 and Shadow Tower Abyss. And you can see like there are evolving ideas back on the PS2. They didn't start with Dark Souls 1 or Demon's Souls. They were continuing ideas. And Dark Souls 2 is a continuation of ideas. They're constantly experimenting. It's just, they hit a really popular game and they weren't content to just stick with what made that one successful. They were like, no, we've got ideas. We can make this better. We have cool things to try. And a lot of them were not very popular, I would say. You mentioned before the kind of kinetics of Dark Souls 2. I can't pin down why this is, but it feels different and weird to play. Weirder than Dark Souls 1, for sure.
So, yeah, the going theory, and again, this is people on the internet speculating based off of some behind the scenes knowledge that has been released, is they were originally building. So this is on a basically a new version of the same engine that Demon's Souls and Dark Souls 1 were on, but it is technically a new engine, but it's a splinter, and then the next engines were then different splinters off of Dark Souls 1's engine. As this, I could be totally wrong about this. This is just as far as I know. And initially the new engine was a lot more ambitious, and then they had to scale a bunch of stuff back because performance and then also like development timeline. And so they had to backport some older versions of the engine, and some of the ways that movement and combat worked may have gotten lost in the shuffle between the engine overhaul and then underhaul. But then I think that, some of the deliberate experiments that we're about to talk about also feed into that. But yeah, it's like Demon's Souls 1 is fast, but sort of floaty. Dark Souls 1 is slow and like impactful. Dark Souls 2 is slow and kind of floaty. And then Dark Souls 3 is fast and impactful.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. The only like really identifiable thing that I can like say this feels off is your weapons don't feel like they have a ton of impact when you hit stuff, especially on boss fights. You kind of feel like your weapon passes through them and does damage in a lot of cases, which I don't think that feels great. I don't want you to recoil when you hit a boss, because you're not slicing through them in real life, but I don't want it to be realistic is what I'm saying, but it doesn't feel great.
Right.
And then there is just like that wonkiness with how it feels to move and jump, and even more so than, all these games feel weird to move and jump in their own way, but this one feels just off in left field somewhere more so than the others. So
it's like there are some slight dead zones in the analog stick, and so you go from walking to running kind of herky-jerkily sometimes. And then also, I know this isn't the case. This is just a feels like, but it's like, it feels like it's not quite 360 degree movement, but also not quite 8 directional movement. It's like somewhere in the middle between those two. It's like, I don't have direct granular pinpoint control over where I turn, but I have like mostly control over where I turn.
A secret cursed third option for movement.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of those experiments that they did to the core Souls gameplay. And again, I'm not going to talk about how stamina systems work. I'm not going to talk about character building, except for the new things. I've done lots of Souls and Elden Ring episodes in the past. And if you're here an hour in and you don't know how Souls games work, God bless you. You must really like the sound of our voices, and I'm very cool with that too. So I think the biggest, there's two that I think are like the biggest, most divisive changes. They have a new stat called agility in this that governs a few things, but most famously governs how many iframes you get when you dodge. And Dark Souls 1, you could not change how many iframes you get without moving between the different equip loads and the different types of dodge rolls that you get. In this, you have a stat that directly feeds into it. So they're kind of saying, if you want more iframes, spend level ups to get more iframes. And you level up this thing called adaptability, which the first time I played this, I hated it because, especially with the older games, when the bosses were comparatively much simpler than they are now in modern times, one of the ways that you could do that you could kind of take on most difficult enemies is to just roll straight into them as they swing their weapon. Yep. Their weapon will pass through your body during your invincibility frames, and you won't get hurt. And then you'll be right in front of them, and you can swing and hit them. And Dark Souls 2 said, if you want that, you got to pay for it. And people did not like that. So before I give my take, what is your take on adaptability and kind of paying for iframes, as it were?
So again, I wouldn't be a fan of these games if I wasn't a fan of how they felt. You know, it obviously, like, part of the joy of the Souls series is that they are extremely, like, at their best, responsive and satisfying in the hands in a very thrilling way. And so, you know, this is not nothing. I don't want to say it like doesn't matter, but like, yeah, I never approached Dark Souls 1 as like, oh, this is a perfect system where every enemy has perfect hitboxes and hurtboxes, and I can always rely on the exact number of iframes and turn this into a bunch of, you know, just like math puzzles with combat timing. It's that sounds very dismissive because I'm saying it in a dismissive way, because I don't value that. But I know I'm not trying to shit on people who genuinely value Dark Souls 1 and 3 for that. It's just not who I am. And so I thought this was super interesting. And also, the other piece that I thought was super cool that I didn't discover until I decided to try a Hexer build is that attunement also feeds the agility stat, but less so. And so you can get iframes as a caster by pumping up your attunement, and it won't be as many, but you know, presumably because you're a ranged character, you won't need as many, but you can get some. So it is not just a single stat that people would say is a quote unquote dump stat. And I think that's the other reason why people don't like it, is that people got so into just like build numbers that they're like, putting points into adaptability does not further the way that I want to build out my build, and therefore it's frustrating to spend a level on it. I say no, iframes can be part of your build. That can be a build choice. So yeah, I'm into it.
It's already part of your build choice if you decide to go for heavy, medium, or light rolling, because those have different iframes. So it's already something you've been building toward in a way. The thing that this got me to appreciate more this time around is how much more important it is early game to actually engage with the moves that enemies have and learn them. And not just like any swing I just dodge straight through, because that's the answer to every problem, is to dodge through it. What having low adaptability early game forces you to do is actually be like, where is that swing coming from? You can still dodge, just don't dodge through the weapon, dodge to the other side, something like that, or dodge back. A lot of early game enemies especially will have like long pauses after their enemy, they slam their weapon down in the ground, and then there's like 3-4 seconds when they're lifting it back up. Just run in and hit them while they're doing that. It really forced me to engage with that in a way that I thought was interesting. I am on a path with action game combat where if there is one answer to every problem, then combat stops being as interesting for me.
Yes.
And
me too.
I don't think that Dark Souls 1 and the other games suffer from this too badly, but if your iframes are so powerful that the answer to everything is dodge roll through the attack, then what do you really know about that enemy? What do you know about
Right.
their moveset? And it's the same thing for, right now I'm playing Ghost of Yotei, and that game has a more complicated parry system, but your answer for basically everything is to parry. It just depends what button you're pressing to parry. So it's like
Right.
not as interesting to me anymore, because the answer is always hit the right button to parry in a different way. And so Dark Souls 2 saying, if you want to play that way, by the way, they give you so many more level ups in this game than the other games. You have extra levels to spend on adaptability if you really want it. But until you get those levels, engage with those enemies and their moveset, or get a shield. Like, shields are still a thing. So this is one thing that, like, it's one of those things earlier where it's like, it feels to me like a knee jerk. This is not how Dark Souls 1 worked. I love Dark Souls 1. This is bad. And it feels like a thing that some people have not taken the time to think about why they made such a drastic change to the way defense works.
Yes, absolutely. And another piece that sort of feeds into that, which I've seen complaints about, is in order to counteract both the dodge forward through the attack and also to counteract the just circle strafe behind him whenever you can. Just keep your shield up and circle strafe behind him.
Yep.
The regular enemy encounters, they now have back attacks or side attacks that will punish certain behaviors that you may have learned to become too familiar with Dark Souls 1. Now, you might be asking, but wait, I thought that the Get Good folks want the Souls games to be consistently harder. I think, and again, I'm not one of these people, so I'm sort of putting words in their mouth, but they wanted the bosses to get harder, and they wanted the areas to become more and more something that you could just bust through. And so the introduction of attacks that punish spammy behavior was jarring and frustrating for them, which is I find fascinating that, like, it feels like there is a cadre of people who essentially want this series to become a boss rush, and they don't really want to engage with the challenge that some of the areas can provide and the surprise that some of the areas can provide too.
Yeah. It's almost like, and I'm sure this is the truth, From Software saw how people played Dark Souls 1 and they were like, what if you couldn't just circle strafe behind every single enemy and be safe? Or what if what if iframes weren't the answer for every single encounter? These are these are design decisions based on things that they thought they could improve or change in interesting ways. You mentioned two things that I wanted to touch on for sure: encounter design in the areas and the boss fights. I think the boss fights are simpler to just talk about real quick. There are more boss fights, and on average, they are fairly easy by Souls standards. And within Dark Souls 2, just by itself, I would say, so there's 42 bosses. I looked it up before recording, a lot of boss fights. I would say that about 10 of them are a real Dark Souls ass challenge. I would say there are probably like 20, 25 of them that are kind of in the middle. They might kill you, 1 to 5 times as you learn their moves or whatever. And then there is a good amount of boss fights in this game that are cakewalks. They are absolute pushovers, even if you've never seen them before. And it's another thing that's gotten criticism, maybe from people who want the ultimate challenge from every boss fight. I happen to think that this rules. I love having a pushover boss every now and then.
Yeah, I do too. And it's I think that it does maybe reduce some of the monumental impact of like, oh damn, I made it to a Dark Souls boss. What's this gonna do? And so like, I want to provide space for, missing that feeling. But it feels amazing to stomp a boss that has a name and a life bar. That rocks every now and then. And then also I feel like some of the levels were made more challenging as like a trade-off to this increase in boss number and then increased variety in boss difficulty. I would say there are still almost as many like monumental big event boss fights as there are in Dark Souls 1. Almost as many. Not quite as many, but it's like I have really distinct, profound memories of a lot of different bosses here.
Yeah. And first of all, we talked about how this world is fading, it's falling apart, things are decrepit. A lot of the bosses feel that way too. Their best days are long, long behind them in a really thematically good way. And when you catch them, Dark Souls 1 very famously did this with one boss in particular, which is like a great moment in that game. And Dark Souls 2 is like, what if a good number of our bosses were at their peak 1,000 years ago? And now they're just kind of weak. And there's a couple like really, really strong ones we'll talk about in the spoiler section. As far as this specific point goes, there are some that you walk in a room and you're like, what the fuck is this, this thing? And then it turns out it has a name, it has a health bar, it has a boss soul, it's a powerful creature, but it's not really a challenge. And I think that from a gameplay perspective, like you said, you can trade off like, the area to get to the boss was actually the challenge here. The boss is not the challenge sometimes, but also sometimes you can do storytelling by having an easy boss fight.
Yeah.
And that's really good. And this is one of the things that I think they've really lost as they've gone along, where like every Elden Ring boss fight is a fucking ordeal. I do think that this is good storytelling sometimes too.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, it can add to some of the melancholy vibe of like, oh, geez, I just killed like, someone whose name has been etched in stone for hundreds of years and it was sort of just easy. That's a bummer. And yeah, there's one like very specific moment where they deploy that on purpose in a way that I just find so delicious that I'm sure we'll talk about in the spoiler wall.
Yeah, for sure. And on the note of the encounter design, we've touched up on this a few times. Dark Souls 2, I think, along with the adaptability thing, the other thing that's like most hated about this game is the encounter design, the amount of enemies in each area, the amount of ambushes. There are a lot. The areas are more densely populated with enemies, and there are a lot of traps and ambushes, for sure. This is something that coincides with the way healing is changed in this game, I think, where you have consumable healing again. You had it in Demon Souls. It was not in Dark Souls 1. Now it's back. You actually have both. You have your Estus and you have the consumable life gem healing. And you have bonfire warping. This is important for this, I think. The fact that from the beginning of the game, you can warp from any bonfire to any other bonfire you've found. So effectively, you only need to go through each area one time. You need to make it once through each area. So the areas are harder to compensate for that. In Dark Souls 1, if you needed to go from, before you get the Lord Vessel, if you need to go from one level to another, you have to run there, ride the elevators, run past or fight the enemies, but you have to go there yourself physically. In Dark Souls 2, you just warp. So each area is harder to make sure that it still feels good to find a new bonfire. And I think, I've seen criticism of this. I don't want to call anyone out in particular, but there's some very popular YouTube essays where it's like I think you know who I'm talking about. The person doing the essay is like, look at all these ambushes. This is dog shit. And they're just running full speed into an area and they find themselves surrounded. And they're like, why is this happening? It's like, because you ran full speed without looking. Why would it not happen?
I think one thing that really does add to the irritation in a way that I do think is kind of warranted is that enemies aggro and chase tethers so like their aggro range where they spot you and lock onto you, and also how far they will follow you through the level before they trip their little programming and start to wander back. Those have both been pretty drastically increased. And so, if you are trying to do some speed running techniques where you're bombing through the levels, Dark Souls 2 does make it much harder to do that.
Or if you're doing boss runs, which is like a real
yeah.
thing, like this game has some
Yeah.
fucking egregious boss runs. And that
Yes.
tether increase, like you said, really makes those worse than they could have been.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes it is like, why is this motherfucker still following me? He's been following me for the last mile and a half. He has to be so hungry by now, and he's still following me. You know, it's funny. They do, and I'm sure that that we'll be talking about this in just a second. But yeah, there is a way to make those boss runs easier.
Yes.
But it takes time, which is that. Yeah, you can now depopulate areas around a bonfire by repeating them so much.
Mm-hmm. I think it's like 10 or 12 times if you kill an enemy, they'll despawn generally. Mm-hmm. And I have a list in the spoiler section of areas where this happened because I did a run so many times. Even on this replay, there were parts where this happened. So like this is, and I think that is I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that's an anti-grinding response to like depopulate the areas? Or is it like, I've proven I can do this 10 times. Just let me fucking walk through here.
Yeah, I think it can be both, honestly. Mm-hmm. And if you really, really want to grind, they make it possible to do that. You just have to use a consumable item to do it.
Yes, that's
and
right.
Like temporarily increase the challenge during the grind. But like, yeah, so I think it's a really elegant system. I do sort of wish that it wasn't married to like infinitely long chase tethers personally, but like, you know, I don't have a problem with the ambushes except I'm structuring every single one of my arguments this way, and maybe I shouldn't, but like, it is something that I want to respond to. Another complaint that some people have about this game is that there is less of a story reason for some of these enemies to be here in these large numbers in these locations. Mm-hmm. Because that is a very cool aspect of both Demon Souls and Dark Souls, is that you can look at the enemy types and where they are in the level and be like, oh, I understand why this guy's hanging out here. And some of these, you know, 9-person mobs, there's less of a reason. What's interesting is, like I mentioned up top, the transition from vanilla to scholar, some of the encounters that they changed made more ludonarrative sense, and then some of the encounters that they changed now make less. So it's kind of the same in aggregate, but that is it's not a huge value for me in terms of like, you know, I'm not going to ding the new encounter design a whole letter grade because of it. Mm-hmm. But there was value in that kind of enemy placement ecology that has been somewhat lost, at least a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm not going to push back on that too much. And again, like anyone who's like, the boss runs are too long, I'm in full agreement on that. Mm-hmm. Boss runs kind of got into the discourse again because of Silksong this year, and I was, funnily enough, playing Dark Souls 2 and Silksong at the same time, and there are, especially in the Dark Souls 2 DLCs, there are just some fucking egregious run backs to the boss fights. So that's, you know, we have this list of like common complaints that I feel like I'm defending the game from in most cases. There's some though where I'm like, no, the Executioner's Chariot boss run doesn't need to be like that. There doesn't need to be that many guys there.
Especially because that is a puzzle boss that you can just die within like 30 seconds immediately in. And then it's like, oh God. And now I have to deal with those dudes on the pillars who are just waiting for my ass, and I hate you. Yeah.
And that's a perfect example of those tethers too, because that's one where if you want to fight them one at a time, you have to creep and watch to see one aggro and make sure you don't move over that line and aggro the second one. It's not all perfect. It's not a perfect execution. And not every aspect of it is well done, in my opinion. But it does feel considered to have more enemies in an area to compensate for the fact that you only ever have to do an area once other than boss runs. So prove that you can do this higher level of challenge one time versus prove that you can do this slightly lower level of challenge several times. That makes sense to me. You know, in Dark Souls 1, think about the first time you did Blighttown and you made it to the next bonfire and then you kept going. Like, you probably only had to do that full Blighttown run the one time to get to the bonfire at the bottom. And Dark Souls 2 has kind of just taken that into every area.
Yep.
So, yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the Estus, the change to Estus and the life gems beyond just like areas are harder, here's consumable healing to help out a little bit during those sections? Also, you have less Estus to start the game.
I really like the trade-off, the two different types of healing. It's like, okay, either you find a window where you can more fully heal, or you can heal quickly. You don't have to spend as much animation time, but you're going to get your health back slowly. Like that is a risk reward that creates a lot of very interesting in the moment decisions to me in a way that just popping an Estus never does. So I really like it.
Yeah, I happen to think that Estus is perfect and doesn't need to be messed with, but this is an interesting idea if you are going to try to introduce more decision making into healing. Like if you're fighting a boss, if I dodge this attack, do I have time to use an Estus, or do I just have time to pop a life gem and try to dodge the next attack, and then I'll be healed up by the time that's all over? Like, it does introduce some extra calculus into it that, having one type of healing doesn't. And life gems are cheap. You can buy them in infinite quantities as long as you have money. Like, it's a good thing if you go level up and you have some leftover souls, just go buy life gems with them and you'll keep a stock. And so I don't prefer this over the regular Estus system, and From Software apparently didn't prefer this either because they never went back to this type of thing. But it is an interesting attempt. I don't think it's a disaster by any means. It's just they're trying stuff out, experimenting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Even if I say Estus is a perfect system, From Software is like, well, let's see if we can improve on the perfect system. So you mentioned torches earlier. They're a bigger deal in Dark Souls 2. At least they try to make it a bigger deal. How do you feel about the torches and the darkness? We'll say.
So this was the most publicized casualty of the engine downgrade that they had to do at the last minute.
Okay.
The torch and lighting system was supposed to be a mechanic for like basically the whole game, and it kind of like Doom 3 style. It sounded like you were going to have to be choosing between a torch and a shield like constantly. I felt like that would have been way too much. I feel like making it a tension builder in like 3 or 4 areas ends up being perfect. Because it adds to, I think that a lot of the areas have really interesting, it's like, there are way more areas in Dark Souls 2, and not every area has a thesis, but every area has a unique sentence. And that darkness is it can be a really good like enhancer. It is what makes one of my favorite areas in the game one of my favorite areas. And so I'm okay with them I'm okay with FromSoft only using it a few times, and I really like it in those times. What about you? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, it feels like those. It's good to know that was a casualty of an earlier idea, because those sconces are still everywhere, even in places that are like fairly well lit, and you're like, I don't feel like I need to use the torch here. But in the areas where it is really dark, there are some areas that are like very, very dark. You need a torch or another source of light to see where the edge is, so you don't run off the edge. And so I like it in those areas. And I think that in the places that it works, it is an interesting decision. I don't know about you. On this replay, did you play a character that used a shield or like an offhand thing of importance, we'll say?
Yeah. So it takes a while to build up a Hexer build. And so you kind of have to start at least half melee at the beginning. And so I went from like a little sword and shield to dual wielding staffs eventually.
Nice.
So yeah, I did always have something in my left hand that I had to swap out for the torch. Yeah.
Right. I played with a shield. So in this build, in this game, I played with big, heavy weapons in one hand and a shield in the other hand. I tried to do power stancing or just dual wielding a big, heavy weapon, and I'm not good enough to play that way. So I used the shield a lot. But it did introduce that interesting decision of like, I need to light up this area. That means I don't have my shield. So that risk reward is cool. There's some areas where like the enemies react to a torch. Like they're much, much more aggressive if you don't have a torch. And it's very cool to introduce that. So like, okay, so my defense is not as strong if I have a torch, but the big threat in the area will not attack me as easily if I have a torch out. So I'm weaker, but I'm being attacked less, like that kind of thing. Cool decision making. You know, I do think it would have been too much to do it for 50 hours. For every area in the game. But when it is there, it's a cool thing to kind of mix things up. And it makes sense to do so in a lot of the areas where you do need to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do want to say that I think there are a couple of fan mods that try to sort of approximate the original, what they interpret as the original design doc of Dark Souls 2 that like, lowers the light and the contrast and makes you have to use a torch more. So if you're a PC player of Dark Souls 2, you can go out and try to experience that. It's not obviously going to be like, oh, this is what Dark Souls 2 would have been, because we have no idea. But it's cool that people are trying that at the very least. But yeah, I wouldn't want to do it for 50 hours.
Right. Yeah. Have you ever played New Game Plus or used bonfire aesthetics to kind of raise the challenge in areas? Because I've never used a bonfire aesthetic.
No, I haven't. And it's interesting because they're like, Dark Souls 2 does give people more reasons to do New Game Plus than than other Dark Souls games, but it's such a long game. And by the time I'm done with it, I'm like, okay, if I want to do this game again, I want to do it with a totally different character, with a totally different approach, and so it's, I've never really had the desire. I think I may have like popped a couple of bonfire aesthetics to grind before a couple of DLC bosses. But other than that, and that was sort of a fool's errand because it takes so many souls to level up by the time you're in the DLCs that it didn't do much.
I have heard that New Game Plus is different in this one because it's less of a victory lap and more of like an added challenge. There's more enemies in New Game Plus. It's probably going to be a little bit easier because you've already beaten the game and you know how things work, but like you're not just going to cakewalk through it the way that I've heard other From Software New Game Plus modes kind of work. So I've never done it though. Like you said, there's a lot of build variety. So if I replay the game, I want to try something else. My first playthrough of Scholar, I played as a spell sword. So I did sorcery in one hand, sword in the other hand, and that was a really fun build. I've heard hexes are a lot of fun. Something that I think it's only in this game, right? They didn't take hexes forward.
No, there are hexers in Dark Souls 3. They work very different. And again, it's like you basically have, this is an exaggeration, but not that much of one in my experience. Spell casting builds are technically viable and playable in Dark Souls 3. You simply have to follow a walkthrough for the first 10 hours in order to like make it viable. Whereas the wrinkle with Hexer is that it plays off intelligence and faith equally. And so you don't have as many points to spend in your physical stats. And so so until you get your mega nuke spells working, or until you start to learn your good Hexer strats for early Hexer, like the first few areas are, in my opinion, much harder as a Hexer than as any sort of melee. But then, you build it up and then you're just like wrecking house in an extremely fun way. And
nice.
The other thing is that like being a ranged character makes certain areas easier and certain areas harder. Which I love how builds are a variable difficulty that will do that. That will make it'll adjust the challenge instead of making something blanket easier or harder.
Yeah, I did a pure strength build on this run, working my way up to like the giant fuck off, like ultra great sword, like great club type weapons.
Yes.
But I did have a pyromancy flame leveled all the way up because it's good to have a fireball spell every now and then.
Yeah.
I did use a bow every now and then. I just used something that fit my stats. So even within like doing pure strength seems like it limits you to just run up and bash stuff. You'd still have a lot of like toys that you can play with in like very specific situations. One of the things that kind of got me in that spell sword run that I did was the DLC enemies are very resistant to magic, resistant to sorcery, specifically, I think, and fire. And this time it was nice to just have like a big fuck off weapon and just go bash, even if it was one-handed, not totally utilizing it. I guess another build thing is power stancing. I mentioned before, that is a thing that people like about Dark Souls 2. If you have two weapons of a similar animation type, I think it is, and you have the stats to wield both of them at the same time, you can do like a special power stance. You hold down like the triangle button on the PlayStation controller and they'll kind of raise both weapons up, and then you will attack with both weapons at the same time if you press L1, which is cool. And so if you got two weapons, or you just like, it looks cool to do this, you can build up a power stancing build, which I tried. And then maybe about halfway through the game, I was like, I need a shield. I can't do this shit. So it was fun while I did it though.
It is very like, you have to be really bought into the best defense is a good offense in order to like enjoy power stancing. And sometimes I just like to turtle up a little too much. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Get a good 100% deflecting shield and just block and attack every now and then. It's very helpful. We've mentioned the DLCs. I think that they're some of the best levels in the Dark Souls 2 like game. Specifically the Old Iron King DLC, just some of the coolest like set pieces and like spaces that you're moving in. They are really difficult. They are an end game challenge for sure. I did them right before fighting the final boss. The final boss of each DLC is much harder than the final boss of the main game. So they are like end game challenges for sure. But I just want to mention, I think they're absolutely worth doing. They're some of the best stuff in the game.
100%. The DLCs are, they were made after the initial development chaos, and also Bloodborne had wound down a little bit, so Miyazaki could, like step in and be a consultant in a more active way. And then also it was just Najima and just Tanamura and not Shibuya. And so I think that they definitely feel a little more cohesively designed than Dark Souls 2. I think the non-cohesion of Dark Souls 2 is a strength of it, but like it's a slightly different vibe. But yeah, the one caveat, because I agree, I think that the DLCs, all three DLCs are fantastic, although the snowy one is slightly less fantastic to me. But they did an interesting experiment in the DLCs that I think is an abject failure, but it is still a very interesting experiment where co-op is a totally optional part of the Dark Souls experience, and it can be extremely additive and cool, but it is completely optional and doesn't really like gate anything off doing co-op or non-co-op, except each of the DLCs has an area that was designed specifically to be tackled co-op, and the difficulty of the area is way upped. I don't think any of those areas work because I think they're too hard. The ways that they are made hard are sort of bullshit. But it's cool that they tried it.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially because I played this on Steam, which I would assume has the highest player base for Dark Souls 2 right now.
Probably.
Just an assumption. I saw one summon sign for another human character the entire time I played. That goes to another probable failure of experimentation, the soul memory system that just locks you out of... It's trying to solve the problem of like people preying on new players in PvP, I feel like, that Dark Souls 1 had.
Yes.
The system that they implemented, though, means so I think it's the number of souls that you've collected either by killing stuff or using items. It like just tallies all those up, and you have to be in a certain range to match with somebody in PvP. Or PV, or be able to summon someone. So I got invaded like 2 times in my whole game, and I saw one summon sign for another human player. I used a lot of NPC summons, especially in those places in the DLC. So those still felt like okay. If those NPC summons were not there, it would have been I would have skipped them. They're terrible without that.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. The way that they're designed is... Like, I don't often say that things in these games are bullshit, but some of those are legit bullshit. They're bad. And so you need help to get through them. Some boss runs in the DLC, and then there's an actual boss fight in the Crown of the Sunken King DLC that's like supposed to be a bring your friends, fight this boss type thing, and it's dog shit, and you should get it done as quickly as you can. We can talk about some of that stuff. I haven't mentioned yet, we're planning a boss tier list podcast, a bonus for people on Patreon, and I will talk all about that dog shit boss fight in that episode. Because I was streaming it. I had a pretty weird and interesting experience with it on that stream. So there's a little tease. But yeah, those PvP, not PvP, those co-op focused areas. Nice idea. I'm not sure how it worked back when the game was new. It certainly is not working now in 2025.
I don't really think they worked back then either, when there was more of a peak player count. The ways that they futzed with the difficulty, I don't think were the right ways to do it. So, it is what it is. But you're right. In 2025, it's definitely the prospects of actually getting through that with a buddy are much more bleak.
Yeah, they do have ways, like if someone wants to play with someone they know, they do have ways that you can link up with them. There's a ring you can buy that like lets you set a password basically, but it's not going to happen naturally, not in the modern time with those weird systems in place. So, yeah. Anything else notable about the gameplay, the playing of the game, as it were, before we move on?
I just want to point out that there are a couple of level set pieces that I think are super cool that will permanently alter a level. You can burn something that depoisons an area, or there's an area where once you flip a lever, a whole bunch of what you thought were totally inert statues will come to life and will just be active enemies every other time that you're in that area. So there are little touches like that create permanent shifts in these areas that I think is super cool. I love that the ocean is almost everywhere in the skyboxes also. It's just it is it feels like the end of the world in so many ways, and I love that. So yeah, the last little gameplay piece is I like the little permanent set pieces that are in this game, and I like that it is like goofy sometimes too.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
100%. There's I was gonna say this when we were talking about ambushes, but From Software has a real sense of humor in these bleak games, these difficult games. I think that if you're on the wavelength of what's going on, there's a lot of comedy. I think the ambushes are often funny. Like my reaction when a guy busts through a door and attacks me is to laugh more often than not. Or if, there's a hidden hole in the floor that's like, if you're paying attention, you can see it, but if you're just running forward, you just drop into it. Like, I think that's kind of funny. But there is a lot of goofy shit. Like, the voice actors are all doing a goofy thing with their voices. Just thinking of like the, what's the place in the shaded ruins with the curse pots that are just like giggling to themselves off in the distance. Like God. That shit's goofy as hell.
It is.
it's it's concerning to hear it, but it's goofy. The hoo, like those little giggles.
I also think the weird leaf gargoyles are both unsettling and also funny in that area.
From Software's sense of humor, not the first time we've talked about it on the show, but it's a real thing, and I do think that they are legitimately, like, they know when to pick their spots. They can make you laugh. I think they're quite good at that, actually.
I agree.
So we've been through a lot. Let's do our recommendations before we get into spoilers. So we always, if we have wrap up thoughts, now is the time for that. But also, if there are people out there who have not played Dark Souls 2, maybe they dabbled, maybe they played Elden Ring. I know a lot of new people jumped on board with that. Who do you recommend to check out Dark Souls 2?
I think anybody who has felt some passing curiosity about Dark Souls 2 and has an open mind, but people who appreciate the Simon's Quests, the Zelda 2s of the world, I think would be interested in Dark Souls 2. I think that if you just enjoy a really vibey game that, despite some comments to the contrary, still has really fun and satisfying exploration and combat, Dark Souls 2 is fantastic.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to make up a guy, but I think there's a guy out there that has probably played Dark Souls 1, played Dark Souls 3, heard Dark Souls 2 sucked, and then played Elden Ring and Sekiro, and they just haven't gotten to this yet. I do think that it's time to check that out if that guy is you. Guy non-gendered. If that guy is you, check out Dark Souls 2. But have an open mind, because there are going to be things that are different. And the knee-jerk reaction that I had the first time I played it is to be like, I don't like these changes because I liked the other thing. Especially if you're coming to this from Dark Souls 1 or Elden Ring, where things are more streamlined, a little bit less weird mechanically, especially. They were trying stuff out here. And some of it worked really well, I think. Some of it didn't. But it's going to challenge you to ask why and try to understand it, I think. And honestly, I think that whatever your first Souls game was, even if it was Elden Ring, those games challenge you to ask why also. It was just not as... I don't think it's as weird and different as Dark Souls 2 was. But the first time I played Dark Souls 1... It was a total shock to the system. Like you said, the first time you played Demon Souls, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
And so this is a shock to the system, even though you think you should already be familiar with it. So if you're open to that, Dark Souls 2 fucking rocks. And I think everyone should give it a shot if they're interested.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great recommendation for it.
There we go. Well, let's do our housekeeping before spoilers. So we always start with the guest. As I said at the top, Ryan is one of the hosts of the Lightning Strikes Thrice podcast and other things on the Pitch Drop network. So Ryan, please tell people about the shows that you do and where people can find you.
Yeah, so Lightning Strikes Thrice is part of the Pitch Drop podcast network, and it's our flagship show. And we do we're referencing Bonfireside Chat once again here on my plug, but it is a Bonfireside Chat style multiple episode deep dive into a different game, usually a JRPG, each season. So we have done the Xenosaga trilogy, the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy. We have done Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter. We are preparing to do a season on the 2 Persona 2 games. And so if you want a like really detailed deep dive kind of like follow along with a field trip style journey through some kind of quirky JRPGs. It's a lot of fun. We have a big back catalog. And the Pitch Drop network that we're on is a Patreon, pitchdrop.cash. And over there, we do little podcasts like anime podcasts. We have a Final Fantasy 14 podcast that is currently on hiatus. And we do like movie podcasts over there as well. So please go check us out there. Thank you.
Yeah. It's good stuff. Right now you're in the midst of which wizardry game is it right
Wizardry
now?
4, the 4. The troll wizardry game, essentially.
I was going to say, like, when I first got to know you all and first got to start to listen to your show, you were like, okay, doing Xenosaga, Final Fantasy 13, you did FF15, not necessarily like the most popular RPGs, but not in like the weirdo sicko zone. And then you went to Dragon Quarter and now this wizardry game. You went into the sicko zone for a while. I think that's super cool too. When you say multiple episodes, it's like 10 or more episodes for the different games. A lot of times, if they're longer games, it's like really taking your time going through the journey.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's beat by beat, and that allows us to really dig into what works and what doesn't, and certain pieces of analysis that I don't think that we would be able to get into if we were doing like, one episode per game. So I think that there's a lot of value in both formats, and I'm so stoked to be a part of Lightning Strikes Thrice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll put links in the show notes so people can find the show. I know there's a lot of RPG fans that listen, so I think you're going to like what you hear over there. So please go check it out. While the spoiler break is going, while the music is going and I'm talking, queue up some episodes. Find a game that you're interested in following along with. I'm super interested in the Persona 2 series. I'm going to try to play along with you all because I'm really curious about that game, or those 2 games.
Yeah, awesome.
I haven't played Persona 3 yet, but I'm really curious about the 2 duology. So I'm going to try to play along with y'all.
That's really exciting. Yeah, we're all really excited to dig into Persona 2 as well. It's a very interesting bridge because Persona 3 and onward, it turns into a totally different style series. And so it's like kind of it's both experimental and also kind of the last version of an older style of Persona game. So yeah, right. Very neat.
Hell yeah. Looking forward to it whenever that is. So again, links are down in the show notes. Please check it out. They do great work over there. And I did most of my plugs at the top, but I will say, if you would like to join a cool Discord community, my Discord server is open. It is public. Feel free to come in and join us. If you like Dark Souls 2, or if you don't like it and you want to tell us why you disagree with what we said, I welcome that too. Just be nice about it. There's an invite link down in the show notes. We would love to have you there. And we also, we're a community that talks about a whole lot of things, not just the games on the podcast. So feel free to join us. We'd love to have you there.
I will say it has been a really fun community to be a part of these last few years. It's a bunch of great folks and a bunch of fun discussions.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. So with that being said, we're going to take our spoiler break. And when we come back, it's going to be full spoiler time for Dark Souls 2. All right, before we get to full spoilers for Dark Souls 2, I'd like to say thank you to the patrons who help support the show. A big hearty thank you goes out to Chris Nelson, Zelgeek, Chris Copleen, Eric Guess, Rick Firestone, Nick Ficori, Soccer, Cupcake, Kyle, Christian S., Matt aka Stormageddon, JD, Doug Leaf, Jason Emery, Brian Skirsha, Jenny E., Marcus O'Neill, Stefan, Drellish, Rigamort, Silcanet, Levi, John E., Aliassi, Joseph Hooper, Yorkie Duval, Aaron, Squill, Alan Kress, Doug T., Retro Overdrive, One of Many Tots, Magic Crow, Tom Danks, Pieboy, Offshore Meteor, Curly Bright, Ian L., and many more. As always, I truly do thank you all for your support. It means a lot to me, and if anyone out there listening would like to join them, throw me a few bucks a month and help support the work that I do, you can do so at patreon.com/realdavejackson. Where coming in the beginning of February, we'll do our next monthly poll for which game I cover on the show, and trust me, you're not going to want to miss this one. So, patreon.com/realdavejackson is the place, and now we will get back to full spoiler time for Dark Souls 2. All right, we're back. It's full spoiler time for Dark Souls 2. A couple of things at the top of this spoiler section to note. Number one, we're not going to talk about everything. We're not going to talk about everything in order. We're going to talk about the end of the base game relatively soon. So if you're like halfway through and don't want to be spoiled, just know we're not going chronologically. And also, we do have a bonus episode planned where we're going to tier rank and talk about all the boss fights. So that's going to be available on the Patreon for all paid patrons. So we're not going to talk about boss fights here in this episode. I haven't done one of these in a long time, but it is a tradition whenever I do a From Software game to do a tier list episode. And I want to keep that going. Those are quite fun. So be on the lookout for that. Patreon is the place to get that if you think that sounds cool. So starting the spoiler section, I think since we talked about despawning enemies earlier, and this kind of coincides with where did you have the most trouble, where did enemies get despawned in your game?
So at first I thought it was just once, but it was actually twice. It was one of them was the gutter, which is I would probably call it the 5-1 / Upper Blight Town of Dark Souls 2, in which it is dark and there are really obnoxious things that slow down your mobility, and there are a lot of rafters that you have to jump across with leaps of faith. But this time there are also horrible repeated blow darts and ambushes, and it wasn't the enemies that was killing me, it was the platforming. But the enemies were so annoying to maneuver around that I eventually was like, all right, I've got to do it. The second one is the run up down at the bottom of Broom Tower, run up to Fume Night. And that wasn't... Yeah. And that wasn't because... That wasn't because like the area was giving me trouble. It was just that's how many times I had to fight Fume Night.
Fair. So yeah, the one in Fume Night, you come up, there's a big guy that like busts out of the ash in the ground. I just ran past him. But yeah, if you are fighting him, Fume Night definitely takes that many attempts for sure. Yeah. Did you ever so in the gutter, did you make the conscious decision I'm going to throw on a podcast and just despawn these fucking guys, get them out of my game?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what I did.
I definitely
knew I was going to be there a while.
Yeah, fair. I've definitely done that in this game before. Hey, in Bloodborne, I throw on a podcast and farm for blood vials, and in Dark Souls 2, it's I just want to get these guys out of here. So yeah, I had 5 places where I ended up despawning enemies. One of them is in the Forest of Fallen Giants under the church. When you go down the ladder from the bonfire, there's 3 guys on those bridges. You're just down there so many times. They got despawned. The first time I played the game, I despawned everything on the run to the Pursuer boss fight in Forest of Fallen Giants, because it just... That was my Waterloo. I couldn't fucking beat the Pursuer the first time. I had muscle memory from 6 years ago when I fought the Pursuer on this playthrough. No problem. But the first time, that was brutal.
It only after the perspective of having beaten the game did I realize how much of the difficulty for me of the Pursuer demon is in the fact that my ADP or my attunement is just going to be low the first time you fight them. And so, you cannot dodge the things that would be smart to dodge with iframes yet.
Right. Yep. 100%. So there was that one.
Mm-hmm.
The Belfry gargoyles really kicked my ass. So I despawned all the guys on the run up to the Belfry gargoyles.
They were so annoying. Good call guys. There.
They're very funny enemies, but that fight took me apparently over 10 or 12 tries. So all of those, the run up to the Executioner's Chariot, which is, for my money, the worst boss run in the base game. Several of those guys got, because it's not that I died to the Executioner's Chariot a lot, but I was on that run enough times. That some of those guys, because sometimes I just died on the run to the Executioner's Chariot. Aggro too many guys at once, and those they hit really hard.
They do. I honestly, that might for me take the cake for my least favorite boss run in the whole meta series. I know a lot of people would cite 4-2 it from Demon Souls as that, but I never had to repeat that boss run because I always first try the boss of 4-2, so I never have to.
What boss is that?
That
if you can remember.
Is he called the Old Champion? He's the guy who's stock stomping around the pillars, and you have to hide from him because he's blind.
Oh, the blind one.
Yeah.
That's a pretty hellacious boss run for sure. So there's that. For my money, the worst boss run in this is the Blue Smelter Demon boss run. And so I despawned some of the guys on that. That boss fight is also terrible. So I died a lot in the boss fight. And so I had to despawn some of those guys. And then this time I was prepared. I was I'm setting aside an afternoon. I'm going to put on a podcast, my favorite Lightning Strikes Thrice episode, and I'm going to despawn these motherfuckers on the Suralon run, because there's so many. And I think it was either 2 or 3 NPC people with me and beat Suralon on the first try, and didn't have to do any of that. But I would have. I was prepared for it. And then the last one was Dark Lurker. Took me a lot of tries, and I despawned all those NPC phantoms on the run to Dark Lurker.
Wow. Yeah, I've never completed the Dark Lurker quest, despite how cool it is, because of some of the deeply annoying things. And game so big, I'm just do I really need to do that? Dark Lurker is cool, but do I really need to do that?
Yeah, I didn't do it my first full playthrough because I read I would not have found the quest without the wiki. So I was on the wiki looking, because I was looking at did I miss anything? And it was Dark Lurker. Okay, how do you fight Dark Lurker? Well, you got to do this quest. You got to do these really annoying abyss sections where you fight NPCs and they're not really interesting. And then I wanted to fight Dark Lurker, and I just like couldn't fucking get it. It was really, really difficult. We can talk about it more in the tier list episode, but I don't like that fight, and it's really hard. So I did the run many, many times, and it's not a run. That's one of the things with the boss runs too, is like we talked about earlier, because you can't just run past enemies. You're not invincible when you're interacting with the fog wall. So
oh my God.
And it takes so long to get through the fog wall. Like you can't just like run unless you can get way ahead of whatever's chasing you.
Yeah.
So you do have to fight a lot of the things on these boss runs. And yeah, that's how we get 5 areas in the game where I despawned enemies in this game, this playthrough. Otherwise, like I had a fairly breezy time with this.
Yeah.
Most areas, most bonfire to bonfire sections were either the first try or maybe the second or third try to get to the next bonfire. The huge majority of bosses were like 3 attempts or less. There's a couple that were over 10, obviously, but yeah, really just a pretty stressful but pleasant time going through this.
Yeah, me too. Shrine of Amana, which is actually one of my favorite areas, it always gets me because it's deep enough into the game where I'm like, I know the geometry of this game, and then I get I drop off, the barely visible cliff, or I panic because I get aggroed by one of the like Yeti dudes, and then I fall off a cliff. So, I think that was the area besides the gutter where I died the most. Yeah. And I still love Shrine of Amana so much, just vibe-wise.
Yeah, the vibes are perfect. The singing in there, that stuff, it's incredible. I think that's the area that I died in the most, for sure. Like, I don't think I despawned any of the enemies, but they were close. I'm sure if I killed them 1 or 2 more times, especially in that first section right outside the bonfire, because that's another one. You can't like run away because they shoot spells at you from across the entire level. Right. And there's so many, and they're set up in such a way where like if you make it up to one spellcaster, the next one in the line has aggroed and is shooting at you. So you're never safe until you can like run behind a wall or something and just kind of chill there. But yeah, very, very tough. And that plays into my favorite kind of storyline in Dark Souls 2, which is I think that the story of Vendrick is arguably my favorite storyline in the Dark Souls series. The Dark Souls series, especially 1 and 2, do a really cool job of like introducing you to either a badass character or the idea of a badass character. And then when you get there, they are not a badass character anymore. Time has taken their toll on them. And that's what's happened with Vendrick. So at the beginning, they tell you, the Emerald Herald tells you, seek the king, seek powerful souls. And like, I got to get to that castle. There's the king. You hear a lot about Vendrick throughout the game. He's this great, powerful ruler. He fought this war against the giants. He stole something from the giants, which caused them to come invade Drain Lake. He fought against the undead. He's the reason why you find undead like prisons all over the place. He's trying to lock them up. And it's like this big build up to finally meeting Vendrick. And you're like, you go to Castle Drain Lake. Vendrick's not there. The queen tells you he's gone to this next place. So he's gone to Shrine of Amana. You go through Shrine of Amana. Vendrick's not there, but he passed through here. You go into the undead crypt. You go all the way to the end. You fight Velstadt, who's like his protector. And then you finally go on down into this area and you finally see what Vendrick is. And it's like this real, if you realize what this is that you're looking at, because it doesn't look like a great king anymore. It is a really powerful moment. It's just as good, if not better, than the similar thing in Dark Souls 1 at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And I love that, like, he did a lot of horrific shit, but that shard of nobility left in him where he kind of like deliberately became hollow to do what he could to save his kingdom, and then now he's just stomping around without any sort of direction. It is, and you don't have to, you can kill him or not kill him, it's
Right.
like you have to kill him if you want to get a certain ending or whatever, but like or not a certain ending, but if you want to advance, I think
you just have to kill him if you want to get his soul and like make a weapon from his soul. You have to kill him, but otherwise you just leave him alone.
Yeah, and I love that choice too. It's like, yeah, no, he's already gone. Yeah, that used to be badass. That is really the theme of Vendrick and so many others.
So for anyone who didn't play, who's still with us, you've just been told all these legends about Vendrick, the great king, and then when you find him deep down in this crypt, he's stripped off all of his clothes and he's hollow and he's just wandering around in a circle, dragging his sword behind him. You can maybe tell that it's him. If you've been following the story, you'll know that it's him because you fought his protector right before that, and you pick up his ring in his pile of clothes. And if you read that, you're like, okay, Vendrick. But he's hollow. He doesn't even react to you being there. He's just wandering around this husk, basically. And then what I think is like extra cool is if you take the time and you watch the Batie videos to learn about why he's down there hollow. It's a pretty cool story, and it's a pretty, like you said, he wasn't necessarily a great person, but it is a tragic end, and he did do a heroic act that put him in this position down there. Like what he did that got him down in that hollow state in that crypt was a heroic act to save a lot of people, or try to. Is this story? So when you play these, is the storyline like, are you reading the item descriptions? Are you watching the lore videos? Are you really trying to like follow along with the story?
Usually lore videos come later for me.
Yeah.
I try to piece together as much as I possibly can with item descriptions and level design, storytelling. But then also, if I'm early on the train, I love to be part of that like early archaeology collaboration where everyone is sort of like trading theories back and forth and like uncovering new things. And so it's even though I'm trying to digest it without the lore videos, it's not like I'm doing it by myself. I like being part of the unlocking of that within that community. But then, it's Bonfireside Chat and Batie Vidya and, a few other just like actual written essays about the story and the analysis and stuff. I love to eat that shit up after I've pieced together what I can.
So this playthrough, I had forgotten a lot of it, and I basically came into it with just remembering that that's Vendrick down there wandering around, basically naked, hollow, dragging his sword, and then piecing together like, why is Vendrick like that now? One of the reasons why I think that this is more effective than Gwyn is because Gwyn still kicked my ass in the boss fight.
Yes.
And like, so yeah, he's not a god anymore. He does not like have godlike strength anymore, but he's still a very, very difficult foe. Whereas Vendrick is like, he still hits like a truck, but it's pretty easy to not get hit in that fight. If you choose to fight him. Also, you have to do that whole quest with the giant souls to like reduce his hit points by like, I think it's like reducing it by a huge fraction to make him even like possible to fight.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise it would take literal hours to and and he also hits harder. And so it's like, both you have to collect enough souls so that it's even possible. And then if you don't collect all of them, then it's still going to be a huge slog.
Yeah. So the reason he's down there is this is what we talked about with like that corrupting power, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that he himself went mad with the power that he gained. But what happened, in my interpretation, is that he grew powerful enough that he attracted another entity that wanted to use that power. And that happened to be Nishandra, his queen, who apparently he married and then figured out later on that she's from the Abyss. She's like a part of Manus, who scattered in a bunch of pieces all over the world. And there's other beings of Manus. There's one in one of the DLCs too, I think.
So it's all four of so each area has basically like a daughter of Manus.
Right. The queen. Yeah. Because if you bring all the crowns back to Vendrick, there's like special dialogue and stuff, and you'll get like a blessing from him if you bring all the crowns. So it's connected. Yeah.
And interestingly, actually, there is a line of critique of Dark Souls 2 that has a problem with the fact that there's not just one Lady Macbeth whispering evil desires into the king's ear, but there are four of them. And Dark Souls can be a little weird about women, for sure. Yes. However, the fact that all of the shards of Manus are women, even though Manus himself was not a woman, that does not... I've never bought into fully the all women are conniving is what Dark Souls 2 is trying to say about women argument, because that discounts, the Crone and the Emerald Herald, both of whom are trying to manipulate you in their own ways, but not out of this evil desire. And a lot of the men in Dark Souls 2 are trying to manipulate you in their own ways too. And then also, the character of Lucatiel. There are enough women who are not Lady Macbeths in Dark Souls 2 to complicate that one critique of it for me, while also acknowledging, sometimes Dark Souls is a little bit weird about women.
Yes. Both of those are true, for sure. Thinking back to, I remember the one from the Ivory King DLC. That is the one who is telling you to go basically put the king out of his misery. I didn't get a sense that was like, hey, put the king out of his misery, and therefore, when you're gone, I'm going to fuck up this whole thing. I didn't get that sense from that character, at least. That being said, the king was corrupted and forgotten to time, so the damage maybe has already been done in that case.
Yeah.
I like the kind of through line between the DLC kings, if you read their item descriptions of the crowns, I want to say, where it's basically all of them say some version of, there was once a great king in this kingdom who did this, and then it's been so long, nobody remembers anything about them anymore. They've all been forgotten to time. It doesn't matter, and nothing about them matters anymore. That's just how this world works.
Yeah. I want to make sure that we have fully talked about Vendrick and Nishandra before we move on, but I want to make a note that I do want to talk a little bit about the Lucatiel side quest in between Vendrick and the First Sin.
Yeah, for sure. We'll come back to that for sure. Cool. So Vendrick and Nishandra. So Nishandra is a being from the Abyss. She wants access to the First Flame. I'm not positive, but I presume that she wants access to the First Flame to put it out and bring on the Age of Dark. I think. I can't imagine why she would want to link the fire.
Right. Yeah.
And Vendrick doesn't want that. So Vendrick figures out he's got to keep her away from the flame, and that involves keeping her out of the Throne of Want, I think. So he puts up all of these barriers to keep Nishandra out. Some things that he does, he separates himself from his soul, and he stores his soul behind a door that only a human can enter in the Shrine of Amana. So the cool thing in the game, you can't get in there if you're hollowed. You have to be in human state to get in there. Nishandra is not human. She can never get past that door without someone else doing it for her. The one of the item descriptions in Shrine of Amana says that the Milfanito's songs like pacify those from the deep or something like that. So Nishandra couldn't go through Shrine of Amana because the songs would put her down or something like that.
Yeah.
Pacify her, which is another cool detail. She's not very strong, like canonically. She's not super powerful. So there's like multiple boss fights that you fight that like they're there because they're stronger than her. She can't get past them. She's not powerful enough to defeat them. If anyone were to say the final boss of Dark Souls 2 is a letdown, Nishandra is not that powerful. It's like in the story, she's not that powerful.
Right.
Like you're stronger than her canonically by the time you get to the end.
Yeah.
So she curses you and shit, but she's kind of a pushover in a story relevant way. Again, looping back to that thing, like not every boss fight, especially not every final boss fight, has to be this hate fuck like challenge.
100%.
You can do story things with your final boss beyond just the challenge.
Yes, absolutely. One last thing, maybe not last thing, but one other thing. So because Nishandra is a being from the abyss, I love how that connects Dark Souls 2 to Dark Souls 1 and here's why. So what exactly Manus is a little bit purposefully nebulous, but so much of the Dark Souls 1 DLC is kind of, you find out that the humans of Ulasil tortured a being enough to basically have him create the embodiment, turn into the embodiment of all darkness and chaos. And so it was humanity that created it. And then when he died, his soul was split off into several shards, which became, these queens who sought out kings. And then Nishandra started to corrupt her king and the kingdom with bits of the abyss, thus sealing humanity's fate. And it kind of, to me, feels like Manus's ultimate revenge. Like, you're going to treat me horribly enough and corrupt reality itself enough that I am created. So I'm gonna fuck you thousands of cycles down the line. You're gonna be hosed because I've infiltrated your kingdoms again.
Yeah, canonically, souls do have like memory to them. Like there's some item descriptions even in Dark Souls 2 that mention like this character found a powerful soul, which then like corrupted them with the will of whatever it used to be. Yeah. And so that makes a lot of sense that like maybe it's a conscious thing, maybe it's not, but the will of Manus probably could live on through those shards.
100%.
This is one of the cool things about like actually paying attention this time is you could play this game and be like, okay, I see the reference to Ornstein in that one boss fight. And I see the reference to there's a couple others that I can't bring up right now. Like I just can't remember right now. You could be like, yeah, surface level things, but like actually it does connect if you dig deep enough and think about maybe like this boss, like I said, that one soul doesn't tell you the story of Manus's soul and its will, but it does let you know that souls do have that capability. So you can then put that together if you're connecting it.
And then with Ornstein, it's like, oh, Ornstein over thousands of years and having drifted away from where he was originally supposed to guard, lost his purpose essentially and became more and more nameless and thus lost his power. And that's why the boss is such a pushover compared to the Ornstein and Smo boss fight. I also love that. It's so cool.
Do you think that that's actually Ornstein or someone who got his soul or someone just, cosplaying?
I think his soul is somewhere in there, whether it's like a memory of him played on through someone else or just like a remnant of the original Ornstein. I'm not sure, but I do think that Ornstein is there somewhere in that guy.
Yeah. I always have trouble reconciling, like, what's the canon if I killed Ornstein in Dark Souls 1 and this is a continuation? So I'm more inclined to think that it's like just a remnant, like somebody found his armor and thought it was cool and maybe found his soul. I don't know. But that stuff, like, there is enough of a connection where you can wonder, like,
yeah.
I mean, there are parallel worlds and stuff like that. So canonically, so like maybe it's something where, I killed Ornstein in one of the overlapping worlds, but this is a different one somehow. So one last thing about Vendrick. So he sets up all these barriers to keep Nashandra out of the Throne of Want. And then you go through the game and you kind of like, basically you break down all these barriers. You kill the Looking Glass Knight and you kill the Throne Watcher and the Throne Defender, and you open the doors that are locked with the King's Ring. You kill Velstadt. So you kind of do what Nashandra wants from you. She's guiding you too. If you can go back to Drangleic Castle and talk to her, and she'll tell you stuff. She'll point you in the right direction because she knows, like, I can't do this, but this motherfucker can do it for me if I can just get him to do it. And then you have the confrontation at the end. Kind of a classic, like, you let me in here, basically.
Right.
Thank you for doing this for me. Now you have to die type of thing. But it is like Vendrick planned for that. Vendrick planned for somebody who would be powerful enough and human, the chosen undead, basically. The only one who can resist or reverse the curse would be the one who can, like, put an end to this, stop Nashandra. And then I think Vendrick wants you to link the fire and keep it going. Take the throne. And that's your choice at the end. Take the throne or walk away. Aldia is Vendrick's brother, and they're both interested in the undead curse and this cycle of linking the fire, basically. I had wondered, as I was playing, about the title of the game.
Right.
Scholar of the First Sin. The scholar is very obviously Aldia, but what is the first sin? And you don't get it for a long time. His dialogue is very like, I see you, chosen undead. I will see you later, for a while. And then you do get into what he views to be the first sin, which was a cool thing within this story to have another character giving their side of things.
Yeah.
But you talked about this earlier and how this is so in conversation with Dark Souls 1 that, like, we're not taking for granted that everyone is like, yes, please link the fire, please continue this anymore. There are people who think that it was a mistake to do it the first time. And that's kind of Aldia's whole deal, I think.
Yes. And it's so interesting because, like, his obsession with the first sin and researching, like, how to ultimately break the curse ended up deforming him and kind of driving him a little bit crazy, but also you see how badly he wants to save the world that he knows as well. He's and I love it's so much more fleshed out than Frampt and Cath. And so the reason why I called it a third ending is that even though getting back on the throne, it's up to you whether you want to like link the fire or usher in darkness. It's like, it's the third option if you are thinking of of the two endings of Dark Souls 1 are the two different endings that could happen when you take the throne. In that sense is the third ending. Apologies for making that confusing. But yeah, I love an uncertainly hopeful ending of like, this could be good, this could be bad. We literally don't know, but we do know that the other ones over there are definitely bad.
Yeah. So like those endings are to take the throne or not. You never see your character interact with the flame.
Right.
So even if you take the throne, you don't know if your character is going to link the flame or not. And I think that the game has been trying to tell you that it kind of doesn't matter because if you link the flame, it's all going to happen again. And if you don't link the flame, it ends. So who fucking cares if you light the flame this many thousands of cycles into this whole thing, right?
Right.
And that's why Aldia is like, this is actually bullshit. Like I think Aldia's whole thing is like, the first sin was linking the fire in the first place.
Yeah.
Gwyn doing that was the first sin. And now Aldia is like, your other option actually is to just tear down this entire world and go into a new age, whatever that is. And like you said, kind of strangely hopeful because it might be the best thing. You don't know. But linking the fire and putting out and like ignoring the fire, both of those suck. So it's an interesting thing where Aldia's ending is like on the surface, not good, but is it actually the best option here?
Yeah, I think it's the one with the most possibilities at the very least. The least set in stone. And sometimes that uncertainty is all we can really ask for, I guess.
Oh man. I don't want to spoil this game. People got mad at me for making game comparisons in spoiler sections before, so I'm not going to do this. But
okay,
a popular RPG put out a very similar ending to this, where it's like, I have a certain ending that is going to be bad, but I know what's going to happen. Or I have an uncertain ending that might be good. It might also fucking suck, but it's the only one that might be good. So I chose that ending because it was the only one where you had hope for the future. And it's very similar if you think about the ending here. Linking the fire on paper is good, and I did it my first time in Dark Souls 1 because I was like, I don't want the world to end.
Right.
We got to keep this going. And then you think about like, what are you saving here? Everyone's dead or hollow, or the world is falling apart. It's one of the very few things that I think Dark Souls 3's story is like really good at, is kind of showing you, hey, this shit sucks. It has to end sometime. And yeah, this ending here is cool in that way, where like, again, Aldia's ending on paper, like iffy, but it's the only one that might end up being good. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, it does. Obviously it's not controversial, but obviously it's contested. People debate which ending is better of this game almost as much as the Dark Souls 1 ending as well. But it seems very obvious to me. I prefer the Leave the Throne ending by quite a bit, just because it's like, we got to try something else. Maybe we don't have to be as governed by this bullshit as we think we do.
And Aldia also, like, I think hypothesizes that this linking of the flame is the source of the undead curse in the first place.
Yeah.
So there's another wrinkle to it where it's like, basically everybody, your own character included, it's been your life's work, Vendrick's life work, and then your quest to end the undead curse. But if you link the flame, I think it's just going to get worse. Like, every linking of the flame, the curse gets worse is how I interpret this. And so, like, again, what are you saving by doing this? Everyone's just going to go hollow faster.
Yeah.
In my interpretation, I guess.
Mine too. Yeah, I agree with you on that for sure.
I feel like this is a uniquely, maybe not uniquely, but common video game storyline, like choice type of thing. Whether you save the doomed world or kind of roll the dice on something new. Dark Souls 2 makes you work a lot harder than, the other game I was mentioning earlier or referencing earlier. Makes you work harder to understand the implications of your choice. The first time I played this, I had no idea what walking into the throne room would do. What does that choice mean? I literally was like, hey, click here to ascend the throne. And I was like, okay, sure. We'll see. We'll see what's in there. And the ending was in there. The ending, by the way, of the take the throne ending is really fucked up. You just go in there, you sit on the throne, and then these big stone doors close in front of you. And you're just like, okay, so I guess my character just lives in there in the dark now.
The throne is also maybe a prison a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Definitely a bit of a metaphor there. So, kind of speaking of, like, we talk about, like, what are we saving versus what are we prolonging? We wanted to talk about Lucatiel's side quest. The most memorable side character. I mean, the laddersmith guy, he's funny. I remember that guy.
Yeah.
But this is definitely the best continuing storyline. In my opinion, I really think it's just because this is the one that's really hammering home what the curse does and some of those story themes that we talked about. So what do you like about the Lucatiel quest?
So I like that it's in direct conversation with the Siegmeyer quest in Dark Souls 1, but has a very different, like, ultimate theme, I guess, which is, it's like, I'm gonna spoil the gist of the Siegmeyer Dark Souls 1 side quest. So apologies, but in that one, you are assisting a bumbling knight through various mishaps. But at the end, if you assist him too much, then he goes hollow because he loses his purpose, because he doesn't feel like he's been able to accomplish anything. And it can be a gut punch. In the Lucatiel side quest, she's way less of a comic relief character, but she keeps talking about whether or not she's going to remember this, whether or not she will be remembered. And instead of letting her finish her own fight, in order to quote unquote beat the side quest, you have to keep her alive 4 times, and then she thanks you and all of that. But what I love weirdly about the Lucatiel side quest is that it hit harder when I failed it, because she becomes so desperate because she's aware now that she's gonna forget this, and she pleads with you to be remembered. And it's almost the inverse, because for me, it's saying, like, memory also lives on in the lives of others. And in order to both truly be remembered and remember, we need a community to help each other out and to keep each other afloat. And again, I think that for such a sad, apocalyptic game, that is kind of a hopeful message for kind of the main side quest to hammer on.
Yeah. I didn't keep her alive. I didn't summon her for enough boss fights, so I got that ending. I think it's the one outside of Aldia's keep when you meet her, when she's, like, really about to just, like, never remember anything else ever again.
Yeah.
And she it's really sad, and she, like, pleads with you. It's very tragic how she's aware that, like you said, she's not going to remember this. And I think it works too, because she's one of the only windows into what it's like to go hollow.
Yes.
Over time, because it happens to other characters, like you said, even in Dark Souls 1, but they don't at least the way I remember it with I've never gotten that far in Siegmeyer's quest, but it happens with Solaire too. He goes hollow.
Yeah.
But it's like he was fine, and then the next time you see him, he's hollow because he's been so disillusioned with what he thought was true that now he's got nothing and he's gone hollow. But Lucatiel, every time you talk to her, she's worse.
Yeah.
A couple times you talk to her, she remembers you, and then suddenly she's like, I think I remember you. And then the next time you're a stranger to her. And then the next time she's completely losing it. And I mean, she's likable. If you summon her in combat, she's decent. Like, she's a character that you don't want bad things to happen to.
Yeah.
And you just see it. You see it play out. There's other characters in Dark Souls 2, like Vendrick, that went hollow, but you see him after all of it's all over. And your character is like dealing with it, but you don't feel it.
Right.
You feel it in those cool ways we talked about earlier where you're like, how did that elevator take me to the Iron Keep? But
right.
You don't see it play out like this because you're a special undead. So I think that's what helps it too, is From Software so rarely, at least in these games, does like linear storytelling.
Yeah.
In like a really easily identifiable, I'm following along this character's arc type of way.
Yeah.
It's really hard to miss Lucatiel if you go to all the areas. You don't have to do these obtuse things to get her to move to the next place. You just got to talk to her. She'll be in the next place. So like, I think that you can pretty easily follow along. Even if you don't complete the quest, you can at least see it through to an ending.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really effective for making you like fully understand, like not what you're fighting for, but like the consequences of your decision, we'll say.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. In that way, it feels like it's like a really good gateway, like window into caring about the story of Dark Souls 2 more.
Yeah.
She's the one who's like, it's like, oh, maybe on the next playthrough, I'll try to pick up more of this stuff. Because I really loved her storyline. Absolutely. And yeah, it is definitely the most powerful representation of going hollow over time. It's amazing.
Which then helps you understand, like, if this is happening to my character, how would they represent that through gameplay? Because my character doesn't talk, so
right.
There's no other way that they could show this to you other than having some disjointed area transitions and think about what that person said in the opening cutscene. I get to the end of the game. I don't really remember why I'm here. I'm just here because I've been playing the game. That's what I do. It all reinforces, like you said a long time ago now, it all folds back in on itself in a really like cohesive and very, very cool way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that we haven't talked about. We are saving boss discussion for that tier list episode, but is there any other storyline? Is there any other, a bit of environmental storytelling that you thought was effective? Anything else that jumps out that you don't want to finish without at least mentioning?
Yeah. Talking about the giants is opening a can of worms that we definitely don't have time for. However, I like that there are these sort of like living dead monuments to what came before that you can sort of like communicate with in a dreamlike state. To me, it shows that there might be some other alternative to the cycle is baked in, but there's also the grand tragedy of Vendrick wiped these fuckers out already. So I wanted to briefly say, without getting into the whole what even are the giants across the three games thing, I like the way that the fallen giants specifically are depicted in Dark Souls 2, and I think that it provides for some cool backstory.
Yeah. The backstory that you get is definitely cool. You saying that they may provide an alternative to the cycle kind of made me remember seeing somewhere that like some beings in this world aren't part of the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't remember what, like maybe the dragons or something like that.
Yeah.
Not it's this above my pay grade as far as Souls lore goes, but I do remember some things exist outside, which makes me wonder, how do you exist outside of a cycle in the same physical space that you live in? Which is, I have no answers for that. It's just a cool question to ask.
Yeah, for sure.
It does kind of give you hope then that if you get rid of this cycle, that doesn't mean that there's nothingness afterward.
Right.
Because it's already been reality for some. I didn't know that the giants were outside of it too.
It's not necessarily that they're definitely outside of it, but that the game is sort of wishy-washy as to, because Vendrick traveled to their land, it's like, well, was their land part of the cycle before?
Okay.
And the fact that that a couple of the corpses have much more powerful, much more vivid memories than the memories of everybody around them, basically. To me, it maybe this is too much of a personal interpretation, but like, to me, that signals there was something different about the way the giants lived, at least pre-war.
They are the only ones that you can like go into memories, right? It's
exactly
just giants.
Yes.
And Vendrick. You can go into a memory with Vendrick. But maybe there's a connection. There is a connection between Vendrick and the giants somehow, because of well, you have to get all the giant souls to make him defeatable.
Right.
Maybe there's something to do with that thing that he stole from them that caused them to come over and invade his land.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is he stole, but maybe that connected them somehow. So,
right.
Well, Dark Souls 2. This is a cool ass game.
It really is.
It's been more fun to talk about this in the spoiler section, partly due to my own effort in trying to understand, which I didn't in some of the previous games. But I do think that this is like really narratively rich with things to talk about. And we've only touched on like the top 3 bullet points of the story. So
it's that this episode, we've been live recording content for 2.5 hours. We could have just done a 2.5 hour spoiler wall if we really wanted to. We could have, but if a game was dog shit to play but extremely fun to talk about, everyone's talking about like type 1 fun versus type 2 fun these days.
Ooh,
and type 2 fun
is
type 1 fun is fun in the moment. Type 2 fun is not fun in the moment, but fun in retrospect, either because of discussion or because of reflection or whatever. So like, type 2 fun is real, but I'm glad that Dark Souls 2 is both type 1 and type 2. Like, it's really, I enjoy playing it, and also I get so much out of thinking about it and talking about it after the fact too. And so this has been a blast. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Really glad that you were up for replaying the game and talking about it. I know it's not a small ask to replay this one in particular. So I appreciate you doing that. And I'm going to be thinking about type 1 and type 2 fun. Nier sounds like type 2 fun.
Yes.
The original
that is a great example of type 2 fun.
Yes. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you again for joining me on the show. And thank you for agreeing to do that tier list episode with me, which everyone can look forward to. It will be on my Patreon page, patreon.com/realdavejackson. My plan is to drop them simultaneously. So if you finish this episode and you want to hear us talk about all the bosses, go over to Patreon, and all paid patrons will be able to listen to that. And we'll probably, I don't know, I might try and do a video component to that. I might decide that I don't want to do all that work and just do audio. We'll find out.
That's fair.
Yeah. But until then, thank you, Ryan, again for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for listening or watching, however you are with us. And know that you're my hero if you're with us to the end. Tune in next week for the next game to come out of the backlog.
Thank you, Dave, and thanks, everybody.
In every shadow, a story waits to be told. I'm Henpai, and my YouTube channel is a journey into the haunting worlds of Soulsborne, Lovecraftian, and dark atmospheric games. Not just gameplay, but reflections, lore unraveled, dreams and nightmares explored. If you crave the mystery beyond the fog, step into the journey. Find me at youtube.com/ihenpai, or simply search ihenpai on YouTube, and I'll meet you beyond the veil.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun. Whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen,
And I am Matt, aka Stormageddon.
and on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there, so we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.